Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nonlinear Podcast. I'm Mara Puach, your host. On every episode, I'm inviting you on a journey of imagination, curiosity, and courage. My guests on the Nonlinear Podcast bring along their personal stories that unfold like pages of a book in which you don't know what's going to happen next. Their nonlinear life and career journeys at some point interact and intersect with the AI revolution that changes their direction. My mission? To show you the messy middle of reinvention, the parts of the journey that you don't see on social media, because I strongly believe that the magic lies precisely there in the messy middle. And I'm happy to discover that over and over again with my guests on this season of Nonlinear. Whether you're in the messy middle of a transition or lost a job, a relationship, or feel like what's going on is overwhelming, stay with us and let's find courage in the chaos. My guest today is the incredible ElsaMarie D'Silva. ElsaMarie is famous for her work as a global activist for women's rights and a true fighter against gender-based violence and sexual abuse. For more than a decade, she's been the founder and CEO of the Red Dot Foundation. But ElsaMarie's story is unfolding, and it's taking her places she never planned or even imagined to go. ElsaMarie, I'm so happy to have you on Nonlinear, and I can't wait to dive into your story.
Thanks, Mara, for having me. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for connecting from across the ocean. I know you've been traveling a lot lately, and I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. ElsaMarie, let's dive in, and I would love to start with the beautiful story of your name. Tell us a bit about the place you come from, your origins, and how did ElsaMarie D'Silva's childhood look like?
I'm from Mumbai or Bombay, India. And the year I was born, there was this movie about a lioness. Her name was Elsa from Born Free. The movie is Born Free. And my mom loved the movie so much that she named me Elsa. And in that year, hyphenated names were in fashion. So she added Marie. And De Silva comes from my family name, which is Goan. I'm from Goa, which has Portuguese heritage, unlike the rest of India, which was colonized by the British. So that's why I have a very Latin sounding last name. I grew up all my life in Bombay, which is now called Mumbai. And my family is a very middle class family, and my parents, in hindsight now, were very liberal. So nothing was off the table. We were encouraged to read. We each had an account with a local library. My mum was a teacher, so she would bring books from her library as well. And I was a voracious reader. I was very, I would say, inward looking and introvert, and often afraid of my own voice. So I would stay silent most of the time. But circumstances pushed me into joining aviation. I wanted to break free. I wanted to discover the world and explore. And I thought by joining aviation, I would get to learn. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, I joined one of India's top airlines at that time, which was Jet Airways. It was a domestic airline. So it didn't fulfill my dream of actually taking me out of the country at that point in time. But what it did was it gave me a platform to grow with the airline. It was a startup airline, and I started as a flight attendant. And every 4 or 5 years, I was identified for a fast track. So talking about women, gender equality, and socio-cultural norms that can be harmful, women are often conditioned to not take risks and to stay quiet. And like many, I was very happy doing what I was doing. And it was the people around me, men and women, bosses, who spotted my potential and offered me roles. So very quickly, I started moving up the ladder. I became a safety instructor, training pilots and cabin crew safety procedures. Then I was identified for a fast track that took me into strategy, revenue management in particular, where I was optimizing flights, trying to make the most amount of money for the airline. and so on and so forth. And then I was headhunted for another startup airline. And over there too, I had bosses who kept throwing me China plates till I could, as long as I could hold them and not drop them, they were very happy. I ended up very quickly in the 2 decades that I was in aviation as vice president network planning, where I planned the route network of 500 daily flights. So in a very short while, I learned that there was so much in that industry that I was not aware of. But if somebody gave me an opportunity, I just grasped it. I learned and upskilled myself as I went along. I realized that there's nothing like rocket science except rocket science, and everything else needs a little bit of, what shall I say, study or, observation, and being humble to say that I don't have all the answers, but I can ask people and learn along the way. And to be honest, I found that even my bosses didn't have the answer. So it was okay. And from them, I learned that it's okay to give your subordinates space to learn and grow and make mistakes and fail, as long as you're learning and improving.
So your aviation story is very connected to travel, which I know you do now a lot. You're speaking, I don't know, you're in 3 countries last week, right? So it feels like I wanted to ask you about this aviation story. Like, when it comes to understanding the world, the problems around the world, different cultures, how does that shape you in what you're doing today?
Oh, I feel that whatever I've learned in those 20 years has equipped me for the role that I am doing today, and on every level. So, for example, having people skills, being able to talk to presidents as well as, somebody who's living in an informal settlement and everywhere in between, comes from the fact that we met people as a flight attendant from all backgrounds, but also worked with different nationalities because we had pilots from different countries, Mexico, Malaysia, Australia. When I was in charge of network planning, I had colleagues in every airport and airline in the world. So you learn to appreciate people, you try to understand where they are coming from, and you learn to find common ground, which
Mm.
helps me in the issue today. At Red Dot Foundation, which we haven't yet spoken about, we don't name, shame, or blame. In fact, we are trying to understand how do we bring people to work together to find solutions, but data based. And the data comes from the last role that I had, where I was planning route networks and optimizing flights to make more money. But here we are using historical experiences of what people have faced to understand patterns and trends to make current and future business decisions. But in our context, it's about the social issue.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it as a safety instructor was being situationally aware, being constantly aware of what are the ways that your life might be at risk and what are the strategies you're going to have to address it or to respond to it so that you can come out of it alive with least amount of injury or damage.
Absolutely. So you're telling me you started in a middle class India, but you had this curiosity and you climb up the ladder, you work with people from around the world, you become this network manager, but at some point you leave aviation. And as far as I know, you're not going back, right? So what made
Oh,
you what was that moment when you said, okay, my time to take
I
this
think
decision?
that year was 2012, where multiple things happened. I felt I'd reached my glass ceiling. So, aviation is very heavy on the ground in the frontline roles with women. But as you move up the career ladder, there are very few women. So, I found myself just one of two women in the boardroom, for example. And it was very difficult because a lot of people, my peers, it's a very incestuous industry. People just move between airlines or between roles, not often between roles, but between airlines. And so the same people who worked with me when I was a flight attendant were now my peers, right? And I was shocked that at one time when I was receiving a lot of pushback, a mentor sat me down and said, they're still seeing you as a flight attendant. And I said, that was my first job when I was 19. Are you saying that after all this time, I've upskilled myself, I've been recognized as worthy of being on a fast track? And yet, people are thinking of me as being dumb. And again, stereotyping flight attendants as being dumb, which, and in an emergency, you're going to have that person be responsible for your life. So I think, the way we look at people, the way we stereotype people is awful. But having said that, in 2012, I found that I'd reached my glass ceiling. I was already vice president, network planning. There were very few opportunities for me. And honestly, I was bored. I wanted a new challenge. And many years before that, I had, because of the observation around me of what women go through at home and at work, and also experiencing sexual violence myself at the workplace, on the streets, in transport, etc., I had decided that at some point in my life when I was able, I would do something on women's rights. Now, what was that something was not clear to me. There are so many issues to focus on. And I was part of a program by the Swedish Institute, which is the cultural arm of Sweden, which focused on CSR and sustainability on business. Now, this is 2012 when we are not talking about these things. There was no ESG, or it was in nascent stages. We didn't even have a department in our airline. So I was very curious about this topic. I was also excited because I thought maybe I can pitch it to be part of my portfolio in the airline, because remember, I was bored. I was looking for a challenge. Now, during that year, my airline went through a financial downturn and eventually shut. So by the end of the year, I was out of a job. Or rather, it was not really a job. We were still working on mergers and acquisitions, but it was clear that the airline was going to be a much smaller entity, and it didn't really need a vice president network planning. Any of my team could have taken over my role very easily. And then we had this awful incident, like a George Floyd moment in my country in December 2012, where a young woman was gang raped on a bus in Delhi and left to die on the streets. Now, that made global news. It also made national headlines. Everywhere we turned, I remember people were talking about it. And it triggered a lot of my memories of, being harassed at work, on the streets, in transport. And I remember also that I'd never spoken about it. And my friends started to share their stories. They had never spoken about it. And it got me thinking, if none of us spoke about it, none of us reported it, what's happening to that data? And so 10 days after the gang rape of Jyoti Singh, we launched, along with some friends, I launched SafeCity, which is a crowd map for anonymous reporting of personal incidents of sexual and gender-based violence. Now, the initial idea was to make what is invisible visible. Because of this underreporting, can we put these stories on a map, look at them as geotagged incidents at the street level, trying to make sense of what are the patterns and trends that were emerging. And as we started to talk about this platform, people started reporting, the stories poured in. And then the question was, now what? Now what do we do? So we mobilized survivors in Mumbai and in Delhi, young women, old women, people who were concerned about what was happening in their community. And we were able to show that with very hyper-local data sets, you could engage the police to change people, whoever you wanted. So educational institutions, transport authorities, or even your neighbors. And so what we learned was you don't have to be alone, which is often the case for a survivor. You think you're alone, it's your individual experience, but physically seeing it on a map where many other people have also shared similar experiences kind of shifts the burden from your mind of being a victim to a survivor, and then putting the focus on the space to say, why is it happening here all the time? And then that led me down this whole urban planning design bit, which I met people who said, oh, a space can be very easily changed. You can make it a positive space. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So 2 years after launching SafeCity, we registered our first nonprofit in India, Red Dot Foundation. And then several years later, we registered in the US, Red Dot Foundation Global. And today, SafeCity is a global application. We have data from 80 plus countries. We have partners in 20 countries that are using the data in their communities to drive change. And we have partnerships with police and city officials. And I think our work is just unfolding because when I first started, nobody understood what crowdsourced data meant and how important it could be. And today it's a very valued data set because it fills in the gaps that police don't have. 90% of our survivors have said that they are not going to the police to report. And so this is data that they don't have, but they need in order to do their work efficiently.
Before we talk about the data, because you're collecting data on the most personal, vulnerable, traumatizing experiences of women around the world, I wanted to, take you back a bit, one step. You said these women realize they're not alone because they see the map of these happenings, etc. I also wanted to, kind of put it out there that you also tackle the global problem, from the get-go. Like you understood that this is something that happens all over the world, and that incident in Delhi in 2012 that basically the whole world was shaken by inspired you to tackle a global problem. And I was wondering, you mentioned we a couple of times, like how many people do you need to start a mission, a cause, or even a movement, I would say, that is now global? Like, how did you get it off the ground?
Those are a lot of questions, but let me try attempting them. So I feel we need everybody to be part of this movement because it's not a single person's issue. It's not a woman's issue. It's a societal issue. So as many people as we can, we need them on board. And from day one, we've kind of designed SafeCity to be a movement, so that you don't need Red Dot to be in your country, Poland, for example, to solve the problem. But you have SafeCity there. We don't have Polish, we have Ukrainian, we have other languages, but say we partner with you. We could add Polish, and then, you can encourage members of your community to share their data anonymously. We don't collect any personal information, no names, no emails, no phone numbers, no social media. We are not even tracking IP addresses. And then once the data starts coming in, you and your community can decide how do you want to solve the problem. And that's where the magic lies, because we've had art on walls at key locations. We call them talking walls, where people express their anger, their frustration, their hope, their dreams on this wall, and kind of put community on notice to say, what are you doing to have my back? And are you really invested in my safety? But we've also had people engage religious leaders to talk to men and boys. We've had urban planners look at it because, one of the top statistics is what is the peak that people are reporting on our app when they are being harassed. And the first peak is between 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. and the second is 12 noon to 2 p.m. And men often think that violence against women occurs in the dark. And many of these men are urban planners, police, city officials. And so they're busy fixing street lighting, which is important. It's absolutely important. But what are you doing about what's happening in broad daylight? And that takes them by surprise because they've never thought of it. They are not, it's not their lived reality. And therefore, they have to kind of now adjust how they are responding. And then to your question, how many does it take? I think it's the power of one. We had one person in Cameroon stand up and say, I want to make my city, my country, my community safer. She wasn't even affiliated to an organization. She collected 1,000 reports. And then we connected her with an organization because as an individual, she needs help and support to take the solutions further, because at that time they didn't even have laws. So the power of one is absolutely critical, and then you need more people to join your movement.
Hmm. Well, you're talking about, of course, the power of one and power of data. I somehow see you right now through the lens of a tech social innovator. Like, it's hard for me to take the tech out of what you're doing with SafeCity because designing global solutions like that really requires a kind of data driven approach and managing super vulnerable and critical data, like in your case. I wanted to ask you, coming from 20 years of aviation, basically being an expert in that, did you ever doubt yourself when it comes to being a tech innovator for the sexual
All the
social?
time. All the
And
time.
how do you
Because
manage that?
initially I felt I was an imposter because I had no technical training. I'm not a technologist. I did not do computer science. I'm not even from a women's studies background, okay? But I feel that, like I said earlier, there's nothing like rocket science except rocket science. It's all about common sense. And so I applied a lot of common sense. I had the lived experience as a survivor and as a woman. I knew what I wanted and I found the people around me to help. So initially, we were able to launch SafeCity 10 days after the gang rape simply because we had Ushahidi, which is an amazing open source tech platform. And it served us well for more than 6 years, till
Mhm.
we decided that we wanted an upgrade and we wanted to customize based on the feedback we had received from survivors. But
Right.
otherwise, Ushahidi was great and it was so low cost, absolutely free. We had a tech volunteer who stepped up, and I know Tech to the Rescue always has volunteers if you need people. But at that time, we didn't know about Tech to the Rescue, but we had somebody in our community who was willing to help us on this mission. And I have found that whatever you need, whoever you need steps in because you're trying to fulfill this mission that is not about you, but about the greater good for society, and the universe delivers. I feel like I'm in this moment where I'm dreaming it and it's happening. But coming back to the imposter syndrome, I think everybody suffers it, women more so than others. And even accomplished women often feel that they are not good enough. So you have to constantly check yourself. Just the other day, I was in a conference of academics. I'm affiliated with the Center for Protecting Women Online at the Open University UK. And they had all these academics and experts there. And I was like, what am I doing here? But then I had to remind myself, I have practical experience that they don't have. And whatever they're talking is theory, but I can connect that theory to my work and, show the value. And so you have to go back to your core. What is it that you do? What is it that you're good at? And focus on that. Don't get bogged down by what you're not good at because nobody is perfect. You're not expected and you don't have to have all the skill sets. But knowing what is your core and what you're good at, also knowing what you're not good at helps you then identify who do you need on your team or in your circle that can complement where you're lacking. And that's what I've done. And that's what I've always done unintentionally as well, even in aviation. So, yeah, I'm at a stage where, yes, I'm a civic tech entrepreneur, but, I cannot. I was telling someone the other day that they have all these labels and they try to fit you into a box. Now, is SafeCity femtech? I don't know, because when you think of femtech, it's usually sexual health, reproductive health apps. Is it civic tech? And then civic tech doesn't take into account the gender. So, what kind of tech are we? And
Yeah.
so sometimes then I say, I don't need to classify myself. Maybe I just say I'm a tech entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that kind of hack that you just reminded us of. Like, really think about the contribution that makes you unique when you're sitting at a table. If you compare yourself with everybody else sitting at the table, you can only remind yourself that you don't know what this guy or that guy knows, but actually they don't know what you know. So just bring it out there, definitely. And now I have to drop the topic because this is a topic about and for people who don't want to freeze in the face of the AI revolution. And, if you listen to the media, AI is coming to get our jobs, replace our relationships with bots, automate everything, and, picture our next years literally in a very dark color. It's obviously a devastating perspective that I'm definitely not buying, and want to do my best to help as many people not freeze in this situation. How do you see what's going on?
It's inevitable. Now, you can choose to be part of the revolution and evolution, or choose to be a resistor, but that's not going to help. And I'll give you an example. So, when I was identified for a fast track in Jet Airways, it was for revenue management, and the airline had already been around for more than 10 years. They were manually assigning seats based on their knowledge, human knowledge, and human experience of patterns and of supply and demand. So they would say 20 seats at this price, 40 seats at that price, blah, blah. And they would manually put those numbers to sell those seats. And what we were trying to do is introduce a new system where you would put in historical data, you would simulate patterns and trends, and the system would spit out what it thought would make the right combination for the most profit, okay, on that flight. And the sales team and the, reservations team was so upset and angry. They thought that we were going to drive the airline into the ground. The machine did not know what it was talking about. They hated one. We had 3 groups, and mine was actually the most profitable group, South India. And they said, "Oh, you're a flight attendant," forgetting that I had, 6 years of flight safety experience. They said, "No, no, you don't know anything, and we are going to not meet our targets." Do you know, in 3 months they met their targets, and after that they said, "Elsa, whatever you say, we are going to agree to." And honestly, that was a life-changing experience for me, because I had no clue, but it was about taking risks in a contained environment. And then you learn, the machine learns, you learn, you start to smoothen the algorithms, you get better at the modeling and the predictive analysis. Now, if I look at AI today, AI is not something new. It's always been there. It's just that now it's more available to the general public. But if you see machine learning and all these predictive analytics have been there in systems for a very long time. It's just that we weren't actively thinking about it. Maybe the general public was not exposed to it, and we didn't know that we had a part to play in how it's shaped. I also think about, and I was telling my team, just about 8 years ago, I was doing workshops for parents and teachers on how to use social media for social good. And they were afraid to use social media. And then you had all these government officials take to social media, and now, of course, with the change in ownership and change in regulations, people are stepping away from social media. But to be honest, the way we've structured Red Dot and the initial marketing was all done on social media for free. And in a way that benefited us, benefited the cause, benefited the coalitions that we had. And with every technology, right from centuries ago, even when the wheel, that allowed you to take your carriage or a cart from one village to another, was seen as something that would make you vulnerable, that would exploit you, that would introduce you to new harms. And yes, there's always an element of how it can be misused, but we are all working towards putting guardrails towards making it safer, to making legislation stronger, to educate people on how to use it in the right way. So I'm an optimist, and I think it's just part of evolution. And we have to invest in upskilling ourselves. Yes, it's not comfortable. We don't like change. But the faster you do it, the better equipped you will be, because there's no turning back.
Sure. Tell me the backstory. How do you do it in your team? Because Safe Cities today powered by, you have a team, right? You have a team that is also going through this. They might also have the same questions that I just mentioned. Is AI going to take my job? Right? Can this thing that I'm doing today be done by a computer faster, cheaper, better, maybe? So how do you do that? And how do you, first of all, how do you draw the line between what humans do and what AI does? And also, how do you manage these emotions, stress, or questions that your staff might have?
So first of all, I asked AI, is SafeCity going to be relevant in the future in the age of AI? And it actually said, yes, it's going to be relevant because you have data that the tech companies don't have. There is a human element in how you source the data, but also in developing your solutions. So that human element cannot be replaced by AI. And there was a third one, which I can't remember. Having said that, I have a team of 20 who are mainly based in India, but also based around the world. And they come from all diverse backgrounds, from rural areas, urban areas. Not everyone is comfortable with tech, even though we are a tech nonprofit. So last year, I insisted that we have a learning hub every Wednesday. So every Wednesday, 5 p.m. India time, someone on the team, or they can bring a guest from their community or a partner, to share an interesting aspect of their work. So it could be part of your project, your whole project, a new idea. So, when my team comes to me and says, we have this great idea, we want your thoughts, I immediately redirect them to the Learning Hub and say, I can give you my thoughts, but I'm one person. We have 20 other people in the team. So let's take it to the Learning Hub and discuss as a team. Initially, there was a lot of resistance. Oh, it's too much. We have a heavy schedule. We can't fit it in. And I'm like, 52 weeks in a year, 20 people, you're going to do it maybe 3 times a year. And it's not immediate, right? So, and this is an opportunity for you to share with your colleagues what you're doing, you're working on. So you don't even have to do an elaborate presentation. Let me tell you, within 3 months, this has become now that we've been doing it for more than a year, we are fighting for slots. Everybody wants a slot because, whenever they have new ideas. And we've had people like our finance team take us through Bitcoin and, cyber currencies and all that. And I was like, what is that related? But it was an area that they wanted to explore. And so they brought it to the Learning Hub to share with other people. And I thought that was great, very unexpected. But yeah.
The AI tools and the landscape is changing so rapidly. I wonder, do the Wednesday learning hubs also help with AI upskilling?
Yes. So last year itself, we started doing understanding Midjourney, how to create images, how to use ChatGPT to create case studies, to design workshops. We also did a lot on the ethics of using AI so that we drafted a policy together, also helped them think about the different ways to use AI. So not just upskilling on the usage of AI, but also the regulations and the ecosystem around it. So much so that recently we had to do an organizational assessment of how comfortable are our team on AI, and I'm happy to report that 100% are comfortable with AI.
That's amazing. And what's one thing in SafeCity today or in the Red Dot Foundation where you have integrated AI successfully?
Yeah, so our chatbot Vera has elements of AI, which is trying to help survivors even before they have ask their question to try to help them unpack it because it's a very difficult topic. We are experimenting on our data set. We can't put it in OpenAI. And we
Yeah.
are still trying to find a more, let's say, a less expensive option because we don't really have the budgets. But we've definitely used it for visualization, for small analysis, like very hyperlocal. We've used it to design our trainings, which are also based on the inputs from our data set. So
Mhm.
yeah, so there's lots of different ways that we are using AI.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I imagine that you guys are really trying to make best use of it, and also definitely, I'm so happy that you're mentioning this budget thing because I also work in a nonprofit today, and we're also considering our options, being also aware of the cost and benefits of all these tools that are out there. Now, thanks so much, ElsaMarie, for actually giving us a bit of hope. I guess that's one thing, showing us that innovation has always been there. Obviously, some leaps are bigger than others. I think the discomfort and the reason why we're actually prone to all these, dooms kind of scenario is the fact that you just mentioned that so many innovations happened in contained environments. And this time, I have the impression that there's less of that contained environment. I think the tech and the AI race that's happening right now is actually the thing that creates a lot of stress among so many people because we really are fed so many scenarios in which, AI takes over, AGI, et cetera, et cetera. So I really hope that we're going to enjoy this period in which AI can do good and, it's in the hands of people that want to do good and want to use it responsibly. People also like you and, of course, other change makers around the world. Can I take you to another place right now? Because I feel like
Before you take me to
yeah,
the other place, I really want to add
go ahead.
one more point. That's about mental well-being. So we use technology and technology can be overwhelming. Technology affects people in different ways. So what we've done is we've done a lot of work on well-being and mental health, but it's in the design of our org culture. So we don't do it separately because it's part of the design. So I would encourage people to do that as well. Be
Give me
intentional
some
about
examples.
how. So, for example, we've always had a psychologist on call. We have safe circles. We have a Zoom out meeting. We have our HR person reach out on a monthly basis to just chat, so you can raise any issues in a safe space. We have a whistleblower policy. We have timeout at the end of the year. you know we don't have very rigid rules around leave, so you can use your leave for whatever reason. We don't need to know, but you do
Yeah.
it. So yeah, and then we've told them, because we are a completely remote team, we don't have clock in and clock out hours, nor do we have any spyware. We just trust you to achieve your goals and your tasks. However, we do require you to attend this learning hub and a weekly meeting with the
Mm-hmm.
team so that, at least those 2 points in the week, you are part of a team. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel alone.
Yeah, that matters a lot. Also, I reflect that so much because I'm also part of a remote team globally, and you have to balance belonging with independence and respect and trust for your
Yeah.
team. And of course, there's so many AI tools out there that monitor behavior and then can tell you, whether the people you work with are really working. But why would you do that? Like, I don't understand. Why would you? I mean,
Yeah.
some
I
AI tools
mean,
are simply
if
not.
you don't trust your
Yeah.
people, what exactly are you doing then?
Exactly. But that's exactly where I wanted to take you when I said to another place because you said this remote team. 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, you took a second bold decision in your life, which is to relocate to the US. How did that happen? And why did that happen?
So we had in 2017 registered our nonprofit in the US. And that was because we had a donor who wanted to give us a large sum of money, and we had at that time no way of taking it in India. And the only way to accept that money was to register a nonprofit in the US. And subsequent to that, we just had this nonprofit sitting there. If there was a grant that required a 501(c)(3), we would accept the money in
Right.
that. But we didn't really have anyone working under it. Before the pandemic, my intention was to transition out into a more global role because as an Indian nonprofit, we are not allowed to support work outside of India. And we just had all these requests and partnerships that kept growing. So I wanted to transition out, but I felt like I couldn't because the team wasn't ready. And then we had the pandemic. And during the pandemic, I was part of a coaching program. And I realized that I was the block, you know, who wanted to transition out but couldn't because as the founder, I had not prepared the team. So we went through an intensive exercise of more than 2 years where we had coaching as a team, not just my successor, but her successor. So 3 of us together. We documented policies because as a founder, a lot of it is in your head, all the institutional memories in your head. So preparing the external parties to accept them as my replacement because everyone wanted Elsa to be there. And I'm like, no, they are equally good, so you just have to prepare them. And then distancing myself so that they have the space to make their own mistakes and lead in a way that was authentic to them. And that was, as a founder, honestly, very nerve-wracking because, it's like your baby that you handed over to somebody and you have to trust them and you trust them, but you don't want to let go. And then I had to do a lot of self-talk to say, okay, that's not how you would have done in that situation. But to be honest, it's their turn to make the mistakes. And it's not your problem anymore. In reality, it still is because I'm still on the board and I'm still, their partner. But you have to let people make their mistakes. And I believe we've reached this stage where I have let go and they feel comfortable. And I've been told that you have calmed down a lot. So that's a good
I
thing.
bet.
But I can tell you that it was an intense experience of more than 2 years. And if somebody thinks succession planning happens within a month, it's not going to happen
Right.
if done well.
Yes, absolutely. I also wanted to ask you, like, from a, let's say, personal perspective, you moved from a very community-based culture in which people stick together, family, the village, the town, the private space, right? Everything is different if you compare India to the US. How do you feel? What are you learning as a leader and also as a kind of ambitious leader that you are? How is US opening new ways of looking at things for you?
To be honest, it's a very interesting time, not just in the US, but also in my country, because regulations are changing. Leaders have different ideas of how the social and development space operates. But when it comes to community, I think it's the same everywhere. And over the last decade or so, I have built a community, which is also in the US. And I'm in DC, and to be honest, I have a lot of support system here. I don't feel alone and I don't feel alienated. I feel very supported. And yes, there are challenges with the changing regulations, but that is something like AI, which we all have to learn to navigate. We may not like, but it's reality. And we have to plan for our organizations and for ourselves to ensure that work continues and is not disruptive. So, what are some of the things that we are doing? Expanding our revenue streams, for example, not relying only on grants, coalitions and partnerships. You don't have to do it alone, but we have a very unique offering. We have a very unique niche area that allows us to partner with a variety of organizations and institutions, and we can add value.
Mm-hmm.
So finding people who want to partner with you, who have a tech mindset, who have this data-driven approach to change. And I'm part of several of these amazing networks. So Peace in Our Cities is one of them. Peace in Our Cities works with mayors around the world to reduce violence in their cities. And SafeCity is an established tech for good in that ecosystem. We just had a regional meeting in Manila where 10 mayors and one governor attended. And it was very exciting because they all want to be part of that change. Like I said, the Center for Protecting Women Online is academia, but they invite practitioners like us to be part of that ecosystem. And so there's a lot of work happening over there. And it complements our work on gender sensitive policing. So I can bring what we are doing on the ground to this group of academics who really want to make a difference. So my honest opinion is cut out the noise around you, focus on your mission, focus on the people who are your tribe, build and strengthen those bonds, and the work will follow, the funding will follow, the opportunities will follow.
Yeah, I know. You told me that one of your mantras is actually "This too shall pass."
Yeah,
And
this too shall pass.
that gave me, when you told me that when we met in person, I thought that's a very soothing thought. Whenever you find yourself in a situation in which you think this is a no way out situation, this too shall pass, says a lot.
And Mara, we spoke about the messy middle, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people think about life as a sprint, oh, I have to get this done, oh, I have to get that done, I have to reach this milestone and this goal and blah, blah. Life is a marathon and you have to pace yourself. And I've reached a stage where there's friction, if it's not working out, maybe it's not meant for now. But whatever's easy, do more of that, because it helps you go a little further.
Yeah, apropos goals, I was just Googling before we met some statistics about the work that you do. And I have to tell you, it was a pretty scary exercise because statistics show that 1 in 3 women worldwide has experienced physical and or sexual violence in their lifetime. Over 1/3 of all femicides are committed by intimate partners, and almost 400 million girls and women were raped or sexually assaulted before turning 18. So that kind of gave me, and can give, everybody listening, kind of the idea of the magnitude of the problem that you're tackling with your work. So my question for you is, you're dealing with something really big, a real global problem. What is Elsa's dream? If you can dream without limits, what is the scenario in which you say, I've done a good job? Is it a goal? Is it a number? Is it fixing is it a story that keeps you going? Like, really, how do you find motivation when you deal with such a, overwhelming problem like this one?
Well, it's easy. The dream is that we live in a world where there's no violence at all, right? Especially against women and girls. However, we have to be realistic. And I'm still aiming that it ends in my lifetime and not 150 years from now. I have 3 wonderful nieces and I do want them to be safe and I want them to be fearless in their pursuit of opportunities and their potential. What would make me happy is if more people got involved, if this is no longer a taboo topic, if we do not say things like, this particular place is the rape capital of the world, because it does not help. What helps is understanding the different forms of violence in the private space, physical space, and now digital space, and the public space, of course. What is public? Even the internet is a public space at the moment. And these incidents of violence, they traverse between all these spaces. So classifying and putting them in silos doesn't help, but understanding the ways in which it happens, why it happens, challenging why it happens, and having better bystander strategies so that you can be more active in preventing it and getting the person the help that they need, those are more important. So, where would I like to focus my energy? In making sure that people don't have a taboo about it so that they can break the silence, share their stories. We understand that better. We use that data in deploying solutions. And collectively, I believe violence can be eliminated completely. Every conversation like this one helps, people understand it better. Bringing people who never would think about it or talk about it into the space is also important, because I'm so tired of sessions where only women show up, like as though it's only their responsibility. I think more men should be involved. I know a lot of young men are very interested in eliminating the violence. There's a lot of political talk about young men moving to the right and therefore they are more, conservative. But I have seen more young men taking an interest, because it's also it's beneficial to them that the women in their lives are safe, that they don't have this trauma, and that everyone can live a comfortable life, a more
Absolutely.
equal, a more inclusive life.
Absolutely. As a mother of three boys, I can tell you that I really hope also that this conversation gets to the ears of people who have not even thought about this topic in the last month, year, or decade even, right? And I'm so happy we were having this conversation. And one last question from me, Elsa.
And 1 minute. And parents like you also are talking to their boys,
Right.
that makes a big difference. They have a reference point and a model to look up to, which maybe our generation did not have.
Yeah,
So the more they see women in the workspace, the more they see women in leadership positions, the more they see that women are not staying silent, they will then question, and be able to also challenge their peers into doing the right thing.
definitely. I wanted to find out throughout your journey, you've taken so many decisions, some controversial, I'm sure, to your community, to your family, the changes that you've done. Who's somebody who's been, cheering for you or, saying, you can do this. You got this, Elsa, you got this.
There hasn't been only one person. I think there's a whole load of them. First of all, my family, my parents, my brother and sister, and their families. I think it's been amazing that they've never ever questioned any decision, always supported me, always included me in their lives. And then my friends, who are my chosen family. And that tribe keeps growing because of all the amazing networks I'm part of. I believe that we lift each other up, right? And I turn to my communities when I need help, and I always get that help.
Okay. I'm super, super happy with this, have this conversation and that I met you and you inspire me really with your power, with your optimism, because you're dealing on a daily basis with the statistics that I just read out loud. This is basically the data that you work with and the stories and the individual stories of the victims that go through harassment, which is absolutely mind blowing. Elsa, is there something like a last thought you wanted to share?
Yes. So once again, there's so many overarching issues, like 1 in 3 women on an average experience some form of sexual violence. I can get bogged down by that. But I go back to my community. Every story of change, every girl that negotiates with her parents for greater freedoms. And when she gets her school bus, like her school bus, as in her dedicated school bus, so she doesn't have to take the mini bus from one village to the other, where she's groped and touched and, commented upon. Or a girl can now stay out later. 2 extra hours can translate into so many opportunities. When I hear those stories of change, or that young man being a peer educator and a safety champion in their community, I get my motivation and hope from there. And that's why I believe what we do works. I believe that change doesn't have to be big at the start, it's very small steps leading to big change. And because I'm in touch with that, I can deal with this very overwhelming problem, which in the beginning was like, I questioned it. I was like, am I the right person? Do I even know enough to do this work? And maybe there's somebody better than me. However, I think that what I've begun to realize is all of us have a role to play, and maybe this is my role, and I'm doing the best I can. And yes, whilst it does feel like it's such a big global issue, whatever change I can make within my sphere of influence, I can own that.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Elsa. I think this story of ElsaMarie D'Silva from Goa becoming a leader in the aviation sector, spending 2 decades and, being really good at it, then turned a social entrepreneur dealing with a global problem, which is gender violence and, sexual harassment towards women all over the world, developing a global solution, the SafeCity app, which I recommend that you check out. And if you don't know about it, go read about it, tell your friends about it, check if your city has it, talk to your communities about it, because this is a fantastic inspiration. Elsa is one of those stories that show us that nonlinear career and life paths are cool. They are absolutely, they have this energy, the power, the curiosity, the learnings on the way, the network that you have on that you also gain on the way. For me, this is exactly the kind of stories that I believe lift us up. And if you're going through that transition right now, when you feel, oh, this is not for me, I'm not good enough for this, just remember this story and get some strength out of it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Elsa, for being with us.
Thank you, Mara, for inviting me.
Thank you. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Nonlinear Podcast. Bye-bye, everyone.